Among the many personality types Carl Jung described, there's one that stands out not just because it's rare, but because it's layered with so much internal complexity: the introverted intuitive. It's a type that doesn't move through life based on external events or visible emotion. Instead, it's deeply tuned into symbols, unconscious patterns, gut feelings, and subtle shifts that most people overlook. It's like living with a radar pointed inward, always scanning for what's forming beneath the surface long before it shows up in reality. For most people, logic and experience guide how they see the world. They need proof. They want facts. They look outward. But the introverted intuitive? Their compass is internal. They navigate by signals most people don't notice. They can sense what's coming before it arrives, feel emotional energy before a word is spoken, and detect deep changes in the atmosphere before anyone else has a clue. It's not magic. It's not imagination. It's a real inner sensitivity that operates on a symbolic level. This way of thinking doesn't rely on cause and effect. It doesn't move in straight lines. The introverted intuitive absorbs impressions that seem to come from nowhere, guided by dreams, images, and archetypes, the deeper structures of the human mind that Jung spoke so much about. It's like picking up whispers from the collective unconscious, decoding meanings that haven't fully taken shape yet. But this sensitivity comes at a cost. The modern world doesn't run on intuition. It wants measurable results, evidence, output, deadlines. So this personality often finds itself caught in a strange place, seeing what others can't, sensing what's on its way, but unable to explain it in a way that's accepted. When they share what they feel, it's often brushed aside, misunderstood, or dismissed altogether. Over time, many learn to keep their insights to themselves. They retreat into silence, not because they want to, but because they're tired of trying to explain things that others can't yet see. And this silence, while it may feel protective, is where the real danger begins. Jung warned about this. If these intuitive visions aren't expressed through words, art, action, they begin to take over. The inner world stops being a source of clarity and starts becoming a trap. The images, the symbols, the insights, they gain power. And if they're not brought into the light of conscious understanding, they can start to run the show. The person no longer holds the vision holds them. It's what Jung called the risk of dissociation. When a person becomes possessed by their own symbolic world, they're no longer living with insight. They're lost inside it. That's why this type of personality, as beautiful and unique as it is, has to learn how to translate its inner world into something real, something tangible, something that allows others in. Without that, intuition becomes noise, visions become confusion, and the personality itself begins to split. But when this energy is channeled, when it finds a way out, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes transformation. In the next part, we'll look at exactly how this transformation works, how the introverted intuitive can take all of that rich symbolic material and turn it into insight, art, healing, and purpose. To understand the introverted intuitive, you have to get one thing straight. It doesn't see with the eyes. It sees with something deeper. You could say it sees with the soul. This type isn't scanning the outside world for clues. It's listening inwardly, picking up on signals that come from the unconscious. And these signals don't arrive with neat explanations or timelines. They come in the form of symbols, images, gut feelings, things that don't always make immediate sense. That's why Jung described intuition as one of the irrational functions. Not irrational as in crazy, but irrational in the sense that it doesn't follow logic or sensory input. And when it turns inward, as it does with the introverted intuitive, it becomes even more abstract. The person begins picking up on layers of meaning that are often invisible to others. A look, a phrase, a silence. These things speak volumes. They carry weight, energy, and an unseen story. But this gift isn't always easy to live with, because the person isn't just receiving information, they're constantly swimming in it. The world becomes a stream of impressions, symbols, intuitions. If they don't have a strong grounding in the physical world, in routines, in the body, in reality, they can easily drift. The imagination becomes overwhelming. They can get stuck in loops of interpretation, endlessly trying to decode what something means without ever acting on it. This doesn't make them delusional, but it does make them vulnerable to detachment. They're not always present. They might forget appointments, lose track of time, or become consumed by a single dream or symbol. That's because the part of them that connects to the physical world, the sensation function, is often underdeveloped. It's like having a powerful radio antenna, but no grounding wire. You pick up everything, but it short circuits inside you. When that happens, intuition begins to operate without boundaries. The mind fills with images that aren't processed, understood, or integrated. And instead of insight, what you get is noise, an overwhelming flood of meaning without structure. The person might start to feel paralyzed, confused, even haunted by ideas they don't know what to do with. But that doesn't mean this inner architecture is chaotic. It's just complex. It's rich with messages, symbols that are trying to guide, warn, or inspire. But they need to be brought into the conscious mind. They need form, they need words, they need creation. Because without that, they become toxic. They fester in the background and start distorting reality. The intuitive introvert begins to live more and more in that internal world, losing touch with what's actually happening around them. They may become withdrawn, preoccupied with inner images that no one else can see. And because these images are often deeply archetypal, things like the hero, the prophet, the martyr, there's a risk of over-identification. That's what Jung called inflation. It's when the ego fuses with the unconscious content. The person starts to believe they are the vision, that they've been chosen, that they hold a truth the world refuses to see. And that kind of thinking, while it may feel empowering at first, is incredibly dangerous, because it shuts out doubt, it shuts out feedback, it shuts out the world. When that happens, they stop seeing people as people. Everything becomes a symbol, a sign, a pattern. They begin to interpret criticism as persecution. They see misunderstanding as proof that they're more evolved, and isolation becomes a badge of honor. No one gets me because I'm beyond them. But that's not growth, that's delusion. What started as a powerful sensitivity to meaning turns into a psychological prison. The person begins to live in a fantasy world where every thought confirms their special status. And because it all feels so internally consistent, they don't question it. But slowly, the ego is no longer in charge. The unconscious is. And this is the real danger. Because at that point, they're not just imagining, they're dissociating. They're no longer navigating the world. They're being navigated by something they don't control. But not every introverted intuitive falls into this trap. There's a way out, and it starts with expression. Finding a channel where these inner images can be transformed into something that lives outside the self. That's what Jung himself did. It's what Van Gogh did. It's what Kafka did. They didn't run from their inner chaos. They translated it into form, into brushstrokes, into words, into systems of thought. And that's where we go next. How symbolic expression can save the intuitive introvert from collapse and turn their inner world into something that can change the outer one. When the intuitive introvert finds a way to express what's inside, really express it, something incredible happens. The very thing that once felt like a burden becomes a gift. The storm of internal images begins to settle. The visions, once overwhelming, find a place to land. And that landing strip is art, writing, music, conversation, ritual, anything that gives the invisible a visible form. Jung believed this was not a luxury, it was a necessity. Because when the symbol remains unspoken, it acts like a foreign body inside the psyche. It doesn't integrate, it festers. But the moment it takes shape, whether in a sentence, a sketch, or even a dance, it becomes real. It becomes digestible. The psyche can breathe again. This is why so many visionary figures throughout history seem like they came from another planet. Franz Kafka, for example, used fiction to process the deep alienation he felt. Vincent van Gogh's paintings weren't just beautiful. They were explosions of emotional and symbolic expression. And Jung? His Red Book was a direct attempt to translate inner chaos into something his conscious mind could understand. These people weren't just being creative, they were surviving. They were building bridges between their inner world and the outer one. But you don't need to be a genius to do the same. Symbolic expression isn't about talent, it's about honesty. It's about letting something flow out of you in a way that makes space inside, that turns confusion into clarity, that tells the unconscious, I see you, I'm listening, and I'm bringing you to life. Still, this isn't the end of the journey, because even the most honest expression needs to be grounded. And for the introverted intuitive, grounding doesn't come naturally. They live in the sky, in symbols, in what's coming next. But without some connection to the now, the body, the senses, the material world, they can get swept away all over again. This is where the sensation function becomes essential. Sensation is the most underdeveloped part of their psyche, but it's also the one thing that can keep them rooted. And no, this doesn't mean they need to snap out of it or abandon their symbolic world. It means they need to balance it. That balance might look like walking barefoot in nature, cooking, painting a wall, planting herbs, stretching, writing in a journal every morning, lighting a candle before bed. Simple acts, physical acts, repetitive acts, acts that remind them they are here, in a body, in time, in the world. These rituals, even when they seem small, create order in the chaos. They tell the unconscious, there is structure, there is a rhythm, there is space for your message, but there are also boundaries. And it's within those boundaries that intuition becomes not just powerful, but transformative. It becomes usable, reliable, shareable. But there's one final challenge, and it's the hardest of them all. Even when the intuitive introvert has found their voice, even when they've anchored themselves in reality, they still live in a world that doesn't value what they see. Society wants proof, it wants data. It wants you to say what you mean in a way that fits the mold. But the intuitive introvert doesn't live in that mold. They speak in symbols. They feel truths long before they can be proven. This creates constant pressure. Every conversation, every job, every social situation feels like a crossroads. Do I speak what I feel and risk being misunderstood? Or do I stay silent and slowly betray myself? Most choose silence, not because they're weak, but because they're exhausted. The world doesn't reward the symbolic. It doesn't know what to do with someone who sees meaning in everything, who listens to what hasn't been said, who follows a direction that doesn't come from logic, but from inner certainty. But Jung believed the journey of individuation, the path of becoming fully yourself, requires that you don't abandon your truth, even if it costs you, especially if it costs you. For the intuitive introvert, this is the true test. Can you live what you see? Can you stay loyal to your inner voice even when no one else hears it? Can you stay connected to symbols when the world calls them nonsense? Can you stay soft in a world built on noise? That's the quiet revolution of the intuitive introvert. Not to fight the world, not to convince it, but to embody the vision. To walk through life with the kind of presence that says, I see something deeper. I may not be able to explain it, but I will live it anyway. And when they do that, really do that, they become something rare. Not just someone who has insight, but someone who is insight. Someone who reminds the world that there's more to life than what can be measured. If that sounds like you, if you've ever felt like your silence holds truths too big for words, or that your visions come from a place others don't understand, then you're not alone. Share in the comments what this journey has been like for you. How do you stay grounded? How do you express what you see? And how do you stay loyal to what you feel, even when the world isn't ready? Your experience could be the key someone else needs to hear. And if this spoke to you, don't miss the next video. It might just give you the next piece you've been waiting for.